High schools after hours are incredibly creepy. During the day, they are full of life, but once everyone leaves, the dark, empty hallways echo with every step. This happened during my junior year, in late November. It was a rainy Friday, and I was stuck late retaking a chemistry exam. My teacher, Mr. Harrison, sat at his desk under a single lamp, while I worked at a lab table in the back of the dark biology room. At around 4:45 p.m., the PA system suddenly crackled to life. It wasn't a normal announcement. We heard Mrs. Gable, the school receptionist, her voice trembling with sheer terror. "Lockdown. This is not a drill. Please lock your doors immediately. He has a..." The audio cut out with a heavy thud, followed by dead silence. Mr. Harrison's face turned completely white. Without a word, he locked the classroom door, pulled down the black window shade, and turned off his desk lamp. "Get under the demo counter in the center of the room," he whispered, his voice shaking. "Put your phone on silent. Now." I crawled under the heavy wooden counter and Mr. Harrison squeezed in next to me. We sat in the pitch black, the only sound being the heavy rain hitting the windows. 10 minutes passed. My heart was beating so hard I was sure it would give us away. Then we heard the heavy double doors at the end of the hallway creak open. What followed made my stomach turn. It was the slow, metallic sound of something dragging against the floor. A pause, then a step. Whoever it was wasn't rushing. They knew they had all the time in the world. The scraping sound stopped right outside our door. The doorknob jiggled violently, then stopped. For a moment there was silence. Then a low, raspy voice whispered from the other side of the wood. "I know someone is in there. I can smell the rain on your jackets." Next to me, Mr. Harrison froze. Suddenly, a scratching sound started at the bottom of the door, like an animal trying to claw its way in. Then it stopped. I saw a faint light from the hallway under the door get blocked. The intruder was bending down, looking through the gap. At that exact moment, my phone buzzed in my hand. The screen lit up, casting a bright blue glow on my face. In a panic, I pressed the phone to my chest, but it was too late. The person outside let out a soft, chilling laugh. "Found you." Instantly, a massive crash shook the room. The intruder was throwing his weight against the door. The wooden frame splintered. On the third hit, the door burst open, slamming against the wall. Through the gap under the counter, I saw his feet. He wore muddy boots and held a long, rusted crowbar. He stepped slowly into the room, tapping the metal on the floor. He was walking straight toward our hiding spot. My eyes were squeezed shut, expecting the worst. But just as his boots reached the edge of the counter, Mr. Harrison screamed and lunged out, tackling the man's legs. A terrifying struggle broke out. The sound of grunting, falling chairs, and a heavy metallic thud filled the room. Mr. Harrison let out a sharp cry of pain. "Run, Leo, run!" he screamed. I scrambled out from under the desk, my legs shaking. I caught a glimpse of the man. He wore a filthy yellow raincoat and a torn ski mask, his eyes bloodshot and wild. He was raising the crowbar, trying to push Mr. Harrison off. I bolted out the door and ran down the dark hallway. I heard heavy footsteps behind me, but I didn't dare look back. I flew down the stairs and burst through the exit doors into the freezing rain. Red and blue lights were flashing in the parking lot. 3 police officers with guns drawn rushed past me into the school. I collapsed onto the wet grass, sobbing, as an officer wrapped a blanket around me. They caught the man on the stairs. He was a dangerous transient who had slipped into the school to steal. Mrs. Gable had spotted him on the cameras, which is why he attacked her before she could finish the announcement. Mr. Harrison survived, though he suffered a broken collarbone. I graduated years ago, but every time it rains, I still hear that cold metallic sound of a crowbar dragging slowly across a tiled floor. I used to think smart tech made our lives safer. I loved controlling my entire world with a swipe on my phone. But after last winter, I will never live in a house with a smart lock again. I do not think I will ever feel truly safe in any home ever again. Back in November, I needed a quiet place to finish my architectural portfolio. My colleague's uncle owned a high-tech cabin upstate that was sitting empty. He agreed to let me stay there cheap just to have someone keeping an eye on the place. The cabin was beautiful, surrounded by thick pine woods, 20 minutes from the nearest town. But the owner was obsessed with automation. The entire house was run by a smart system called Central. Every door had an electronic lock. The lights, the thermostat, the cameras, everything was connected to a hub in the utility closet. When I arrived, it felt amazing. Walk in, and a calm, automated female voice echoes through the ceiling speakers. Front door unlocked. Welcome home. It made me feel secure. I set up my desk in the living room, facing the large glass windows, looking out into the dark woods. During my second week, the system started acting up. I would set the thermostat to 72 before bed, but at 3 a.m. I would wake up shivering, finding it reset to exactly 55 degrees. Then, the kitchen lights started turning on by themselves. I called the owner. He was confused. He said he had not even downloaded the app yet, and I was the only admin. He suggested I reboot the router. That night, things got worse. I was lying in bed trying to fall asleep when the smart speaker in my room clicked on. It did not play music. It just emitted a soft, static hiss. Then I heard it. It was the distinct sound of slow, heavy breathing coming right through the speaker. I jumped up and unplugged it. My heart was racing. I stood there in the dark, trying to convince myself it was just radio interference. But there were no neighbors for miles. The next morning, I checked the system log on my phone, and that is when my blood ran cold. At 3:14 a.m., my bedroom lock had been engaged. Then, at 3:17 a.m., the log read, "Master override key used. Inner lock deactivated." I had never used an override key. I did not even have one. I checked further back. Almost every night, around 3 in the morning, the master override key was being registered. I called the police. 2 deputies came out, but they found no signs of forced entry. An older deputy shrugged, saying these gadgets are always buggy, and some hacker was probably just messing with the server. They told me to lock the manual deadbolts, but there were none. Every lock was fully digital. That evening, a massive winter storm rolled in. By 8, the wind was screaming and snow was piling up. Around 10, the power went out. The cabin plunged into pitch blackness. I felt a wave of relief. No power meant no internet and no remote access. I went to bed, pulling the blankets up to my chin. I woke up suddenly. The room was freezing. I could see my breath in the moonlight. My phone was completely dead. Suddenly, a sharp chime echoed through the dark house. It was the startup sound of the smart hub. But how? The power was still out. Then, the automated female voice spoke from the ceiling speaker. "System running on auxiliary battery backup." My chest tightened. "Front door unlocked," the voice said, flat and mechanical. I froze. I did not breathe. "Living room motion detected," the voice announced. I felt a tear of pure terror slip down my cheek. I stared at my bedroom door, which was cracked open. "Hallway motion detected," the voice said. Whoever it was, they were coming for me. I slid out of bed, my bare feet hitting the cold floor. I grabbed a heavy ceramic mug from my nightstand, my hand shaking violently. "Master bedroom door open," the voice whispered from the ceiling. The door slowly creaked open. I stood in the corner, hiding in the shadow of the wardrobe. A tall, thin man stepped into the moonlight. He wore a filthy, tattered coat, his hair wild and matted. But what terrified me was what he held. A small, glowing tablet wired to a battery pack. He did not look at the bed. He looked up at the ceiling speaker. He tapped his screen, and the speaker hissed. He spoke into his device, his voice raspy and close. "I told you to keep it at 55 degrees. I screamed, threw the mug at his face, and bolted. The mug shattered against his shoulder. He gasped, dropping the tablet. I sprinted down the dark hallway, ran into the utility closet, and slammed the heavy door, sliding the manual iron bar into place. Outside, I heard his dragging footsteps, but he did not pound on the door. Instead, I heard the electronic click of the lock. "Utility room locked," the automated voice announced. He had locked me in. I turned around, using the blue light of the server rack to see. The rack had been pulled forward. Behind it, in the wall, was a large, crudely cut opening leading into the crawl space. I crawled inside with a small flashlight. In the dirt, there was a sleeping bag, empty bottles, and a monitor wired to the cabin's security cameras. The previous owner had never left. He had built a hidden space under the floorboards before the bank seized the property. He was not hacking me. He was living under my feet, watching me sleep on his monitor. Through the closet door, I heard his raspy voice. "You are in my house," he whispered. "You are using my electricity." I did not answer. I scrambled through the tight crawl space, dragging myself toward the external ventilation grate. I kicked the plastic grate until it shattered and tumbled out into the freezing snow. I ran through the blizzard barefoot until a snowplow driver found me on the road, suffering from severe hypothermia. The police searched the cabin the next day. The utility room was empty, the server rack pushed back. The man was gone, taking his things. They found his entry hatch under the back deck. They never caught him. I live in a small, old apartment now. It has creaky floors and a rusted iron lock that requires a physical key. But sometimes, when the temperature drops a few degrees at night, I lie awake in the dark, and I wonder if there is someone in the walls, waiting for me to fall asleep so they can change the settings. In search and rescue teams, there is one rule that is never spoken of to civilians. If, deep in the forest, you find a person who has been missing for more than a week, never approach them from behind. First, call them by name, and if they don't turn around immediately, run. Run as fast as you can. My name is Mark. For 3 years, I worked as a volunteer in the forests of Oregon, searching for lost tourists. During this time, I saw a lot of shit. People driven mad by dehydration, bodies torn apart by bears. But what happened last Thursday made me burn my uniform. It all started with the disappearance of the Everhart family. A father and his 10-year-old son went hiking in the Blackwood Wild Zone and never returned. On the 5th day of the search, our headquarters shut down. There were no chances of survival left. But I was a fool. I decided to search the old sector number 4 alone. By 7 in the evening, the fog descended on the trees like a heavy, dirty blanket. The air became damp and smelled of rot. You know, that sickly sweet smell of decay that you can never mistake for anything else. As I pushed deeper into the thicket, my flashlight beam caught something blue on the ground. I stepped closer. It was the father's backpack, caught on a thorny bush. It was torn open, but not by a bear. The heavy nylon straps were sliced clean, as if by giant shears. Inside, his flashlight was still on, its battery dying, casting a weak, flickering light onto a pool of dark, sticky liquid on the grass. And then I heard it. "Dad, look. What a bird." The voice was childish, high-pitched. It came from the thick blueberry bushes just 20 yards away. My heart hammered furiously. Was the boy actually alive after 5 days in this freezing wet forest? I pushed through the branches and ran into a small clearing. In the center of it, with his back to me, stood a child. He was wearing that exact blue jacket that was specified in the search description. "Kid," I called out softly. "Can you hear me?" He didn't move. I took a step forward, and then a strange, unnatural crunch paralyzed me. You know how a dry branch sounds when you step on it with all your weight? That crunch came from inside his body. Crunch, crunch. Slowly, incredibly slowly, his head began to turn toward me. But his shoulders remained absolutely motionless. His head turned 180 degrees, directly into my face. He had no eyes. In place of his eyeballs were two deep, black liquid oozing holes. His lower jaw was unnaturally stretched, hanging almost to his chest, held only by thin fibers of torn skin. But the most terrifying thing, his mouth didn't move. Yet from this black maw, that same clean, cheerful child's voice came out again. "Dad, look, what a bird." It was not a child. It was a puppet. Something was sitting inside this body, using it as bait. From behind the tree behind the boy, it slowly emerged. It was huge, about 3 meters tall, skinny, covered in gray, parchment-like skin. Its arms were unnaturally long, with fingers ending in bony growths. One of these hands was holding the dead body of the boy's father, like a puppeteer holding a broken doll. The creature made a sound. It wasn't a roar. It was the sound of a fast-forwarding cassette tape, turning into a terrifying, static, distorted whistle. I bolted back. I have never run like that in my life. But the forest was pitch black, and within 50 yards, my foot caught on a wet root. I went down hard, sliding through the mud and losing my flashlight. The darkness swallowed me instantly. As I scrambled to get up, I heard it. The rapid, heavy thudding of something massive sprinting toward my position. I didn't have time to run. I dragged myself under the massive roots of a fallen spruce tree and curled into a tight ball, pressing my hands over my mouth to quiet my breathing. The heavy footsteps stopped right outside my hiding spot. Through a narrow gap in the wet roots, I saw it. The skinny, 3-meter-tall gray legs. It was standing completely still, its head tilted, listening to the dark. Then, the dead father's head, hanging from the creature's hand, slowly opened its mouth. "Mark, are you lost too?" The voice didn't belong to the father. It was the exact voice of my search team leader, Miller. The creature stood there for what felt like an eternity, mimicking different voices from our rescue radio channel. Finally, it turned and began to crawl away, its limbs snapping like dry kindling. I waited until the sound completely faded before dragging myself out of the mud and running blindly toward the highway. I burst out to the road where my car was parked. I put the key into the ignition with shaking hands, slammed on the gas, and tore away. The wheels spun in the mud, throwing gravel. In the rearview mirror, I managed to notice how the gray figure with the empty eye sockets of the boy stood at the edge of the forest and waved its hand at me. I drove without stopping. The clock on the dashboard read midnight, then 1, then 2. About halfway home, the car radio, which was completely turned off, suddenly hissed to life. It was just white noise at first, but then a voice cut through the static. "Mark, wait, Mark." It was my own mother's voice, sweet and calm, coming from the car speakers. I slammed my hand onto the power button, but the static only got louder, turning into that terrifying high-speed cassette whistle. In a panic, I reached under the steering wheel and ripped the wires out to make it stop. I didn't go to the police. What would I tell them? I would have been locked up in a mental ward. I arrived at my suburban home in Portland only at 2 in the morning. I went up the porch, walked into the house, locked the door on all deadbolts, and slid down the wall to the floor, exhausted. It's over, I thought. I'm home. I'm safe. But the house was too quiet. I walked into the bathroom, turned on the tap, and splashed freezing water on my face. When I looked up into the mirror, my heart stopped for a second. My eyes were bloodshot, my face covered in dried mud and scratches. I looked like a ghost. I wiped the mirror, walked out, and went to the kitchen to pour myself some water. My hands were still shaking so badly the glass clattered against my teeth. And then I froze. On the kitchen table lay my cell phone, the exact one I had lost in the forest during my panicked flight. On the screen, one new notification was glowing. A video message from my wife, sent 10 minutes ago. With trembling fingers, I pressed the screen. On the video was our bedroom on the second floor. My wife was fast asleep. The camera was slowly approaching her face. Whoever was holding the phone was breathing heavily and hoarsely. Suddenly, the camera turned to the mirror on the wardrobe. In the reflection, I saw myself, or to be exact, a creature that looked exactly like me. My face, my clothes, but its neck was twisted at an unnatural angle, and from its mouth, which didn't move, a whisper came. My own whisper. "Mark, I'm already home. And where are you?" The screen went black. At that exact moment, on the second floor of my house, directly above my head, a heavy, slow crunch of breaking bones echoed. Crunch, crunch. And slow footsteps in my own boots began to descend the stairs to the kitchen.